welcome, folks, to the first ever LGBT film panel for the New York City Independent Film Festival. I don't feel like I have to introduce myself because I'm right up here, but I'm David Lally. I'm an actor and a writer, primarily a writer these days. I will act when asked. And I have a lot of filmmaking friends who ask a lot, so I do it for the fun of it. But writing is my career, my profession. No day job, that's my day job. So I'd like to, without further ado, introduce the panel. We have Anthony and Alex, filmmaking duo.
Hi.
And Emmett Jack Lundberg, who says show creator and writer here, but he wanted me to introduce him as a writer and an actor. Correct? Filmmaker and an actor, so that's okay. But anyway, why don't we get started by talking a little bit about how we came to where we are. So,
Sure.
You guys want to go first about what's your background? How did you get to be filmmakers?
So Alex and I we came here and we started in acting school together. This was like 12 years ago, maybe? 15. And then immediately, like the day we graduated, I was like, I definitely don't ever want to act again. This is the worst thing I've ever done in my life. I want nothing to do with it. And so I immediately went into directing and we started directing theater. We did theater for like 5 years, and then it slowly transitioned into multimedia where we were using a lot of film in the theater we were doing. And then we transitioned into theater was so expensive and it was so unsustainable for us as, you know, we were waiting tables then and we were like pumping all our money into putting on shows that 6 people saw, and it was
like
just
2 weeks and then
Yeah.
gone, like no proof that anything happened at all whatsoever. We had nothing.
Right. And so then we transitioned into music videos and fashion films, and we got a lot of work there, and then we got asked to do our first documentary. And we did our first documentary about 3 years ago on Suzanne Bartsch, who's like New York City's biggest party producer. And now we have a lot, like there's a lot of documentaries we're doing now.
Right. Yeah, we found ourselves in like documentary land, which is like very cool and exciting, and we did that for a while. We never stopped doing that, but
yeah,
going back to theater.
Yeah.
It's all back to theater.
Well, a documentary is it's a hot filmmaking genre now.
Yeah,
You know,
and I've definitely fallen in love with, like, I love it so much. I love it so much.
The perks of the people that you meet and the places you go is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. I mean, I always feel like with documentary, you're not only making a film, but you're getting a life experience. Because
Right.
you're entering into somebody's world that you probably never would
Right.
had you not been making a film. I mean, I always think back to the Maisels brothers,
Yeah.
you know, with Grey Gardens. You know,
Right.
it's like they were invited to do a little tribute film for one of the Kennedy women's birthday. They went out to Grey Gardens and they found, you know, this place in disrepair, but they found these 2 fascinating women.
Right.
And so when they were fired, they decided, we're going to go back and just make a movie about these 2 women.
Right.
And I mean, you know, look
Yeah.
what became of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also amazing. It's not just going to places or meeting people that you wouldn't normally meet. You also have like carte blanche to ask them anything you want, and it's like part of the dynamic. It's just a wild experience to like be like the social situation is. I can just ask you what I want, and you really aren't going to ask me much. I'm like, I'll tell you, but you're not thinking about that. So it's a very cool place to be in, where it's like you're a very visible fly on the wall. Because to like communicate.
But at the same time, you're also forging relationships with these people
Definitely.
in a very
Yeah.
different way
More than
than
anything
if
else.
you were doing
Yeah.
a fiction film.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, it's like all about like figuring out, like having somebody trust you to tell their story through your own like version of them. Because like the Suzanne film is like Suzanne is a human filtered through Anthony and I as people into like a movie, a 90-minute like here's kind of an idea of a person, when really it's what it takes to get to that point is for Suzanne to allow us to do that. It's a very intense thing to allow somebody to do that. And it creates like a relationship that's kind of family-like but different because the stakes are different and the interpretation is different, and we know her on a crazy level and she knows us by being there, but like she doesn't know the details of our past, but we know the details of her past that we asked her about again and again. It's a very interesting, very special relationship for sure.
And I think it helps that because it's probably the relationship that's most like theater.
Yeah.
Where when you do a show with somebody and you get to know them and you really get to experience part of their life and they're experiencing part of yours, but in a different venue, obviously.
Yeah.
And then dealing with like the intensity of like the character, like
It gets deeply personal.
and she's also a person who's like, after we made the Suzanne film, people asked us to make a lot of different films about people that were mainly rumored to be hard to work with because it looked like
Yeah, we
it
got
would have
asked to
been
do-
a hard task to get Suzanne,
Yeah.
who's the set of this doc.
We became sort of the guys that were known for working with people that were difficult to wrangle, and so we got asked to do a lot of
Which is a weird-
documentaries on high profile.
Which is a weird pigeonhole.
folks. Yeah, yeah.
I got a few people I need to wrangle. Emmett, how about you? How did you get to?
So I grew up in Wisconsin and I went to an arts high school. So I've kind of been doing that for a long time. I applied to NYU. It was the only school I applied to. I wanted to get out of Wisconsin and come to New York. I studied film at NYU, and then, so about 5 years ago, I wrote a pilot for a web series called Brothers, which is the first narrative series about trans guys. And I showed this pilot to my producing partner, and we said, you know what, let's make this ourselves. We don't really have to wait for anyone else to do this. And it kind of took off from there. We did a whole first season, which is on Amazon, and we have 2 episodes in our second season. And we've done like festivals, we've done all kinds of stuff with that.
And how? So you always wanted to become a filmmaker.
Yes.
You didn't want to do theater. You didn't want to do.
Well, I did do theater in high school.
Okay.
That was my major in high school. They didn't have a film-specific major, and I really liked set design, but then I knew going to college I wanted to study film.
And why film as opposed to television, or is it just?
To me, it's a little bit interchangeable. I think it's
It's become-
the medium of the moving image, right? I think both ways. You know, I have serial ideas, but I also have ideas for film, so it's kind of both for me.
So let's get into the LGBT issues. As an LGBT person in this business, what have been some of the surprisingly good things that you've encountered, and what have been some of the maybe not necessarily surprisingly bad things that you've encountered?
I would say, just putting out a story like Brothers, which in a lot of ways is similar to my own story. The reason that I created it was because there was no other content out there that reflected a narrative of trans men in a positive way, and being able to do that and put that out there really allowed me to connect with people that I may not have, and like they came to me and said, you know what, I'm not trans, but I related to this part of it and I understand. So I think it was a really interesting experience to see how people could connect with a story that is obviously not exactly their story, but they understand the emotions, they feel the things that the characters are feeling.
I think that, like, for a long time I was really scared to use my voice, like to really insert my queer voice into my work, because I was afraid that it wouldn't be sellable enough, or it wouldn't be what people would want. I dressed very differently. I was much more conservative in how I presented myself to the industry. And then I think as my queerness became more inserted into my work, and the more out there my identity became, the more I was embraced. I don't know if I was embraced by the industry. I think I sort of forced myself onto the industry, and then when you're sort of expressing your voice in that way and you see audiences and they're like, oh my god, I love this, and then you get like bigger and bigger entities are coming to you to make things, it's like you find this sense of power in just being who you are, and so the identity and the persona and self gets bigger and bigger, and it feels better and better to really sort of let yourself just go, not only in presentation but also in the work, just to sort of express the depths of your queerness through your work.
No, that's great. I find too, for me, I get more and more confident.
Oh yeah.
The more I realize it's not a big issue in a lot of circles, and I'm accepted for who I am,
Right.
and it really doesn't matter who I am.
Right.
My voice counts.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also a sense of just the vulnerability, like when you like allow yourself to like actually speak like how you're feeling, and to like tap into the thing that it feels like a very, very authentic way of being, by being I think people can recognize that without being able to like name it, that that's like a very vulnerable thing to do. And I feel like that is something that is, to be in that space is like very good just for the brain. Like to be like constantly able to express something that is like hard sometimes like to express that you're just not sure of. And then on top of that, it definitely feels like there is right now, it's a weird thing where it's like there's a mainstream thing that has like a very specific like list of amount of like queer things they can have in it, this or that, but there is also, I feel like something that felt more niche is becoming less to a certain extent, of it being like in many circles like popular to actually have like a queer voice. Do you know what I mean? Like it's becoming like an actual, there's like a sense of like importance, like a sense of like stories that haven't been told, that have been shut down for too long, that is like in many cases I feel like being recognized like by a quota, but the idea that there even feels like a quota is like a time now that is very interesting, which is happening right now. Like even like talking about like documentaries becoming more popular, like the ideas of things like that are shifting because of the amount of media people are taking in.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing this a long time, but I've noticed over the years, it's like I'm less and less the, for lack of a better word, special case in the room, and it's like, and now I'm seeing other minority groups like, oh, you're going through what I went through 20 years ago, you know, in terms of where you are in the business, where you are in life, where the public accepts you, that kind of thing. Tell me a bad encounter that you've had, just one.
I mean, like, to me, it's like when I think of like bad encounters, it's really kind of difficult to describe. It's never like, we're not in an age or an era now where it's the kind of situation where like we're in a room, we're in a meeting, and somebody says like, oh, you're too queer, like get out. Like it's much more subtle than that, where you just feel othered. And you feel othered by either the way that they talk to you, or the way that they like ask questions, or just like use a phrase like just wrong enough to allow like you to know that they're coming at it from a space that is not an authentic experience, which in those cases immediately makes me feel like it doesn't really matter like that what I'm saying, as to whether or not like I'm being heard or not, if I'm seen as something that feels like almost like a snack of sorts, that is like, is this going to fill a specific slot that I can like put in, that there's like a criteria for this much queer content, and to be a part of that is a very intense thing, because it means to a certain extent like being almost like feel like being used, but is like for like what purpose? Like to get a voice out, or is it really just, I mean, like we're pitching something right now in which we had to like cut like a little sizzle together in order to sell the idea of it, and we pass it off to an editor for the company's kind of like putting it together. And when we got it back, it felt like it passed through the hands of a much more heteronormative, straight experience. It became less dangerous and less about the things that we're angry about, and more about the things that have been accomplished. And to kind of sit in that space and think like, okay, so is this actually the voice of the show that we want to make? Does that even matter for selling something? And then you go into a place of, if I allow this to feel like a straight perspective, and I'm selling it to a room of people that are probably most likely going to be straight, do I just allow this to happen in order to make my show after it's sold? And so like, it just becomes like that gray area of like, what is almost like my own responsibility to what I want to say, compared to like selling it to a person who's just like really trying to fit me into like a slot.
I think that like, you know, this has been a recent thing for me, that like when you're growing up and you're queer, your voice is stifled so often. Like for me, through childhood up through like running away from my hometown at 17, you know, you're constantly told that who you are and what you are isn't okay. And so to be in an industry, and it's an industry that is very run by straight people and has been for a long time, and cis people, you're constantly faced with the feeling, whether it's during a Q&A at a film festival, not this one, or you know, or in a room at Netflix or HBO, you can feel if somebody's judging you from across the table. And I feel like I've had to work really hard to be confident enough to not really care about that and to just keep going. But there's definitely a part of myself that walks out of the room and is in the shower and thinks like, is there something wrong with me still? Am I, you know, those feelings that you had to face for 17 years do come up occasionally, because you're in an industry that is so straight and cis and heteronormative that yeah, I think you're constantly on a daily basis faced with, right now we're working out at Refinery 29 and it's wonderful, but it's a lot of straight people, a lot of straight women. Love them, but you're constantly faced with like not being around people who have had to go through the same things you have had to go through, and so yeah, it leaves you in a very weird place of questioning if you're good enough, or questioning your own sense of identity sometimes, which can be hard.
Well, yeah, and I think maybe we should discuss this a little bit later. I think it's just working in an industry where it's like people don't get it because they've not had your journey.
Right.
They've operated from this, the big buzzword now, privilege.
Right.
This
Yeah.
And they don't understand that not everybody, just grew up and fell into this job, or
Yeah.
there were struggles along the way.
Right.
And when you've never struggled, you don't get that.
Right.
And then it's not a common point of ground that you.
That's
have in common.
exactly right. That's yeah. And
I find you end up doing a lot of
totally.
teaching.
Totally. Yes.
In that
Completely.
case.
That's
And
right.
what about you?
Well, outside of negative comments, I think, so I get people who reach out to me, they want to write a script about a trans character or whatever, something like that. They want to get my input. And the worst one really was someone who just had no idea what they were talking about. And they said, I want to write this trans script about an FTM character, and I just want to write it so that Michelle Rodriguez can that's her name, right? Michelle
Yes,
Rodriguez.
Yeah, that's right.
We all chuckled.
Yeah,
We knew
yeah.
you meant.
So I just want to see what she looks like as a man, and I was like, okay, I think you should not write this. This is incredibly offensive to the community, and you're obviously not the person to do this. So that was definitely one of the.
Yeah, that sounds like somebody's personal fantasy kind of spilling over into
Yeah, I don't know.
a filmmaking. So, all right. Well, since we brought it up, let's talk about privilege in the industry and your thoughts on it, your encounters with it, how you fight against it.
I think that for me, it's become really obvious in the past year that it's so much easier for straight people, or straight identifying people, or straight looking people even, to walk into a room and be met with like an equal amount of understanding and respect. And it takes a queer person, or a queer looking person, or a queer identifying person a lot longer to like gain that from anybody in the industry. It takes a lot. It takes more confidence. It takes more being more boisterous, being the loudest person in the room. It takes a lot of work to get on the same playing field that straight people are just handed from sort of birth.
Yeah, I always find that you're the curiosity in the room, but
Mhm.
people don't take you seriously
Right.
because of the way you look.
Right.
Simple as that.
Yeah. Yep.
It sometimes doesn't even have to do with how you identify.
Sure,
It's just
yeah.
simply you walk into a room, and
Yeah.
even if you're stealing the spotlight, it's just whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, for me, when I think of privilege, a lot of it is the privilege of representation more than anything else. But it also just reminds me of the privilege of being a part of specific tribes that just look out for each other. There's just this. Even when we were with the film that we did, it went to festivals, and then we were trying to figure out where could it go, and the sales agent, the people, it was always about trying to get in front of a queer person. That's almost the only chance. And then it's really intense because it feels okay, so is it all about just the privilege of having this group of people that take care of their own, that are societally from the very beginning just embraced, whether it's cisgenders, and then it just makes me kind of as far as the industry goes, there's privilege within privileges within privileges, because there's a lot more cisgender gay males in the industry right now than there is anyone who's trans, or anybody who's non-binary, which isn't barely even barely even a conversation. So there's definitely, I think more than anything else, there's an intense privilege, because if we need to get our film in front of a queer person, or for it to count as something, it means that we're looking for the one person in the group of 12. And if that's what it takes, then the privilege of having the societally accepted the other 10 or 11, it just means it's barely even a conversation. It's a much better chance.
I mean, I kind of feel like that's society, though.
Exactly.
It's like we barely accepted gay men.
Mm-hmm.
Gay women are always a curiosity, so they'll always be accepted. But then it's like when you try to go beyond that, it's like they shut down. They it's like does not compute. They can't understand.
I think on the non-binary front, it's become really, I tend to disagree, because I feel like it's become really popular. Like, I feel like there are a lot of people within the music industry and the film industry that have seen it as a way to gain, I guess, like, fame, followers, and, like, more politicized love to come out as something that maybe maybe isn't something you're the most attached to, but because it is a popular thing, you're like, well, that is what I am today.
Like they're not non-binary?
Yeah, I think I might have told you this. There was an amazing New York Times article about how when everybody is using the word queer to identify themselves, who is actually queer. And I think it's a really interesting conversation because I think it's become a really popular thing, and I think there are a lot of people that use it to gain sort of a foothold in either a discussion or a place within the industry where they could have gotten there on their own without having to use this thing that isn't maybe their most authentic self.
So more, I'm going to market myself,
Yeah,
brand
totally.
myself by putting
Totally. I feel
this
like
to the forefront, whether it really is true or not.
Yes, completely.
It's popular, so this is what's in.
Definitely.
Yeah, I feel there's a little bit of that
Yeah.
out there.
And well, I definitely within the industry benefit from privileges. I'm white, I'm read as male, I have these things, but still I think the most obvious thing to me is that the trans stories that are getting out there and that are getting seen are still told by cis people.
Totally. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Definitely.
I met Jill Soloway at a PFLAG event. For those of you who don't know what PFLAG is, it's Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. The whole show Transparent is based on her father, who, came out to the family and transitioned and everything. So do you feel does that feel authentic? Does it seem authentic?
That one I'm okay with because I feel like that story is a family story with a trans character. And Jill is telling the story from their own point of view, that to me is fine. It's not like telling a trans story.
Mm-hmm.
Can you think of any examples where it feels like very false or thrown in? I remember the days when there was a television show that one time, as a twist to a story, character was raped, and then the twist, they thought it was her teacher, and the twist was the teacher was gay. So it was just used as a plot point more than, they weren't really going to explore that issue or anything. It was just like, oh, he couldn't have done it because he's gay.
Yeah.
So anything out there that feels like really false or
I don't know about anything like that.
or just like as you said, because it's written by
Yeah.
a
I just
cisgender.
think of Friends.
Well, Friends is
Friends
problematic
is
in so many ways.
Friends is so fucking
right.
offensive. I feel like I just
Does
watched
have
it.
that character.
I just watched it recently for the first time. I was
It's
like,
so
wow,
unclear
this
if
is
that
a
character
problem.
is trans or
And how many people were obsessed with it in the 90s
Yeah.
that just like got it in their brains and are now just like walking around with that shit in their, like, a lot. That's
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen it since it was originally out, but yeah, at the
It's
time,
a problem.
at the time, that was the way the public could digest that.
Yeah, totally.
In a comedy form, making fun of it.
It's also really homophobic.
It's
wild.
that's kind of what I'm talking about. It's
Yeah.
like so
Yeah.
homophobic. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah, sexist.
And of course,
Yeah.
that's the show everybody loves and watches, so
Yeah.
it's just perpetuating that.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's still Netflix is doing very well with it. I'm willing to bet.
It's Friends, The Office, and
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
other thing that everyone watches. Right?
And it's funny because I actually don't watch The Office, and it's like I'm sure I can feel love for these shows. But even The Office, we told to watch one episode, and it was for some reason we clicked out of all the episodes, and it had to do with finding who the gay person was in the office. And it was the whole episode, and it was just really we didn't get through very much of it. It's a very I don't know. It's funny how old that feels and how not old it is.
Well, yeah, because it wasn't that long ago.
It's very recent.
I mean, I remember when Friends was, Thursday night, everybody rushed home to watch Friends, and Friday morning you talked about it because,
Right.
it was still the, the earlier, I mean, people were, had VCRs and were recording it, but it was still, but that was a water cooler show, and it was like, so what happened on that show was very important, yet they weren't taking it seriously, and it was obviously not written by
Right.
people who went through that experience.
Yeah.
Everything was for
And it also
That's-
has 6 white characters.
Yeah.
You know?
who live in fabulous
Straight.
apartments that don't cost them much.
Yeah.
In New York City,
Yeah.
Amy Sedaris always makes a joke about, because you see all these shows filmed in California about the New York experience, and a lot of times it might have been written by people who lived in New York at one time, but have totally forgotten
Yeah.
New York was like,
Yeah.
because now they've gone Hollywood. And Amy Sedaris always jokes that she would love to see a TV show or a film filmed in New York that's about LA. It takes place in LA,
Oh, that's
and just
great.
use New York
Yeah, that'd be
locations
great.
to kind of mock up LA to show them
That's
like
good.
it doesn't
That's
work,
hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So since we're talking about sort of this straight privilege within the industry, why don't we just explore this a little further? And,
The straight privilege?
yeah, because in a way, well, and maybe we should, if we can go into your story a little bit,
Mhm.
your backstory about how is it different now that you are a trans man versus.
I think, the biggest difference is the authenticity, which is a huge thing. And I think that translates to just connecting with people more in general. But, I don't feel like the industry is quite there with trans stories. I don't feel like, trans storytellers are necessarily taken seriously or, known as like, this is a person we can bring on to tell any story, right?
Yeah, they like sign on Laverne Cox and like, we did it.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah. So, and that's also something too. There's also a lot of trans women who are visible,
Right.
and there's not a lot of trans men.
Yeah.
That's a whole other thing that, I have ideas about, but I'm not really sure. I think it's a society issue in general. When I showed someone the pilot episode of my series, which is clearly like, well, to me it's clearly about trans men, but he asked me afterwards if I then was transitioning to be a woman. So trans men don't even exist in some
Wow.
people's minds. Like, they're not even like, it doesn't even make sense.
That's interesting. Everybody just assumes that men want to transition into women and women don't. Wow. Just as a person walking down the street, though, do you feel any different? Do you feel you're given more respect? Do you feel sort of that
I
white
definitely-
privilege now as a man that you didn't feel?
What I feel
Prior to that?
is, I almost feel like a spy, because I feel like people say things to me that they wouldn't have said to me before.
Okay.
And, and I can like see that difference very clearly, because I've experienced being read as female and as male.
Have you read Nora Vinson's Self-Made Man?
It sounds
Oh,
familiar.
yes.
You gotta.
That's
It's
a
so
great-
interesting.
that's a great
Yeah,
book.
she
Yeah.
talks about that
Yeah.
for a while.
She do it for a year or
Like a year or something like
she
that.
masquerades as a man.
Yeah, it's really amazing.
And
It
passively.
was- yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Incredibly.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good book. Yeah, I read that book, and there's another book that she wrote. I can't think of the
Yeah.
title, but okay, interesting. I find now that, I mean, I've been out for years, but being gay almost works to my betterment, because a lot of my peer group who have
Sure.
moved to the suburbs and have raised kids and have kind of not lived the life they want, they sort of glamorize my life as a gay male in the city, like, oh, you get to do whatever you want, and you go out at all hours, and I'm like, well, you see what I'm posting on Facebook. I'm not posting every second of my life on Facebook. Yeah, it's maybe a little more exciting than your day-to-day, but yeah, I get the glamorization
Right.
of the gay lifestyle with my friends.
Sure.
How about you guys?
I mean, like, definitely feel that for sure. I mean, there's like a certain extent where, like, even like the production company we're in has like 2 straight males, like as far as identifying goes, and there's definitely just a sense of, I don't even know how to describe it, but there's a sense of, I mean, like, we posted like on Facebook really recently, like a quote from like a John Waters quote where it had something to do with like a character being really afraid that her son wasn't gay and would live a boring straight lifestyle and like how do I find a job and get married and have kids, and even posting something on that is like posting something about being like straight is boring or something like that. Like a lot of like self-identifying straight people comment on that of like totally agree, like it's true. There's definitely like the perception of I don't know, like there's like I don't know if the Netflix the Hannah Gatsby special, like there isn't really a lot of space for the belief that a queer experience could involve like just like sitting and watching TV.
Yeah, normal everyday.
I mean, even that because like I mean like yeah, but like there's still a sense. I feel like for everybody, I don't think that like queer people are like not a part of this, but just an idea of what it means to be certain aspects of queer, like certain like boxes you have to like check off in order to be that. And I do feel like there is something like happening right now in the bubble that we're in. I mean, like if we were in a different state right now, I mean, everything that we're talking about would feel different than like this New York City independent film moment where there is like an appetite for other voices right now. It's becoming like popular within a certain amount, and I could be able to like say something. And like this is not the time for the white cisgender heteronormative male as far as like what production companies are looking for in the sense of like it's easier to like automatically have like a voice just by like the way that like you can get checked on Facebook. Because like your friends will like picture something that doesn't even have to be real for it to be beneficial.
I worked on the show Teen Wolf, which was on MTV for several seasons, and the creator of that, Jeff Davis, is gay, openly gay, and I mean, you know, there was a little bit of, for me, internalized homophobia going into that writer's room and onto that set, because I watched the show and I know I've got an 8-year-old godson that watches the show, and I'm uncomfortable watching the show because there's a lot of, you know, there's some heterosexual sex, but it's mostly gay men sex on that show. And I'm thinking, wait, this is a show that's marketed for 8 to 14-year-old, and this is like softcore porn to me. And I expressed that to Jeff, and he's like, that's why we're doing it, because
we just talked about that.
The cisgender straight people have told their stories time and time
I could
again.
not agree more.
We're now telling these stories and showing that it's okay.
I also think
it's not a plot point. It's not a
great to make people feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's not just there to be sensational.
Do you think
it's there
like,
because that's the generation.
Right, and do you think like when you talk about like your internalized homophobia, like do you think you would have thought that as quickly if it was heteronormative sex, or was it the fact that it was homosexual you think that was
Oh, you mean if it was
yeah,
boys and girls having sex?
Yes.
I wouldn't question it, because that's what I'm used to.
Exactly. It's
But,
like what you
yeah,
get
I mean-
acclimated to. It's like what you get like
Yeah.
gets shown as like appropriate representation wise.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I was all for that on Teen Wolf, but it was just like, I'm like, are we okay doing this? Are we being responsible?
Yeah.
I'm thinking, well, yeah, all the times they show a man and a woman having sex on TV in shows marketed to children.
Yeah, well, it all starts
Why
like,
can't we show
we
this?
have this.
But that's a generational thing.
It all starts in puberty class, where like
Yeah.
you're not taught. I was never taught what it was like to not have straight sex or to not be the gender I was born into. Like, and still that happens. Like,
Separated by
I mean,
gender,
every
topics.
single. None of us grew up in a school where it was like, you know, your sex ed class was talking about like what queer sex was like. It was always straight sex. It was always binary bodies. So I feel like, yeah, of course we all feel uncomfortable around.
And even shame with those things. those,
Right,
within
right,
those
yeah,
accepted
yeah.
things. as
Don't
far
talk
as-
about that.
Yeah, as far as the purity thing, like those, there was a lot of, I mean, like my sex ed class did not come with like, and it's gonna be great. It was like, if you're gonna do this, please do it like this.
Oh, we only got to wear a condom. That's all we ever got. So, growing up, did you identify as gay? Were you?
No. Like for me,
when did you
like I felt like when I grew up like in a very. It was interesting because like my friends were like it was all women and my friends I grew up with 2 like gay boys but like no I didn't like I am like very comfortable with like my masculinity, like I liked sports, like I liked all the things that like a society was like okay you're cool, like that's like totally fine. So like I didn't have a sense of something is wrong. I felt more, and it's like a sense when I came to New York, like years ago I came to New York, it wasn't right away, more a sense of like I haven't really allowed myself to be fully who I am. Like I more like made myself smaller to fit like what was very comfortable for me. And it wasn't until like I was able to like intellectualize certain things, to like go to certain places, that I was able to like really tap into something that was like always there for me, but was never really exercised because it never felt like comfortable. I never felt like I never had like the almost like the privilege and like the problem I had even growing up was like I never felt like something was like so wrong with me that like I have to figure this out and like figure something. Like I was never really like an issue because I liked so many things. And also I came from a family also that was like very like my dad was into theater, sports was never like a thing. Like there wasn't really anything in my house that immediately divided the genders also that made me feel uncomfortable as far as like men in this room and women in this room. Like never a part of like my family. So I just grew up in like that very liberal sense, and it was only until really working like within like the projects that we were doing and working like within a community that felt more and more like expressing yourself and like being the most authentic and like and also like worrying less about like spending like years and years and years and years like presenting or thinking of myself in like a way that I didn't even realize I was putting myself in, like in a box that was like much smaller than I was, that was just like comfortable.
Yeah, I think my journey has been really weird. I feel like, yeah, for years and years and years I had to like sort of be a certain thing that I was supposed to be in Connecticut, like present a certain way. And I think in many ways it did so much damage, but in other ways it made my voice so much so much fucking stronger. And so I put so much of that pain, I think, into the work that we did specifically after acting school. I put it all sort of back into all the work we do, which is sort of why I'm like completely obsessed with I'm obsessed with the work, because it really it became such a huge outlet for me to express all the things I wasn't expressing for 17 years of my life, and I'm currently still getting out of my, you know what I mean? I always will be, you know? So I think, yeah, I think that my journey of like not being open to who I authentically was, and now that I am open to who I authentically am, all of that stuff back there has really informed every single project, whether it's theater or a 2-minute fashion film or a feature-length documentary. You know, it's all sort of informed by those years of really having to not be who I really was.
I speak in a program in the public schools here in New York City called Safe Schools, which is all about bullying and being LGBT. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I always tell the kids is like, I always feel like I did things 10 years after a straight person.
Yeah,
like I didn't date when I was in high school. I dated when I was in my early 20s.
Right.
I didn't go to my prom and I started, and I didn't even really get, I was doing theater, but I really didn't get into television until my mid-30s. Mm-hmm. And I kind of feel like, well, what if I'd been out all that time, or what if I had that opportunity that I could have been out all that time? Would I have gotten farther faster?
Right, yeah, and that's another, that goes back to straight privilege. Yeah. Straight people don't have to worry about identity, so it's easier for them to rise faster. We spend so much time focusing on like who we are and like struggling with that. Or hiding who you are, and so you don't get a chance to rise as quickly as a straight person would. I think about that all the time.
It's interesting you say that. I feel the same way about, I didn't medically transition until I was 28. And I feel like that's when things started to happen for me in terms of my writing and my work and all that. But when I was 14, I came out as a lesbian because I also didn't know that trans men existed. A year or two after that, I saw Boys Don't Cry and suppressed that trauma for years. And then, I really started to think about my gender when I was in my early 20s, and funnily enough, I saw someone on Oprah, like talking about a trans man on Oprah. So the importance of representation right there. If you don't see yourself, if you don't see someone who mirrors back to you who you are, it's really hard to figure that out.
Yeah. And you certainly haven't had the experience of, say, like a typical gay man or a lesbian, where it's like you kind of feel there's strength in numbers because you come to a city like New York, and you know you see you everywhere. You know, it's like the invisibility of trans people is always what shocks me. You know, and really, I mean, to me, it's a learning experience because I've met more transgender people in the last 3 years than I think I probably ever, you know, knew, whether it was, you know, knowingly or unknowingly. And it's just, you know, and I really feel I'm learning, so I can imagine what the rest of the public is going through.
Yeah.
You know, it's like if I don't know the terms and I don't know, you know, the issues and things like that. PFLAG now has a trans group that meets separately. It's 10 times the size of the regular PFLAG group because it's almost like it's, you know, this has never been addressed. Like I said, it's what gay people went through 30 years ago. Is really, you know, which is great, but you got to bust through that.
Yeah, and we're still fighting every day for the rights that are being taken away from us, you know?
It's tough. So let's talk about the importance of representation in media. Obviously, we see gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender, not as much, but, you know, in all these different ways. Bad example, Friends, you know, good example, you know, maybe Call Me by My Name, or, you know, things like that. Do you feel it's improving? Do you feel it's gotten better? You mentioned earlier about, you know, it's like people kind of think there's one type of gay person. And it's like, if you like sports, oh, well, that checks off a box in a cisgender world. Or
I mean, like, it's tough to talk about, like, because I watch a lot of things. There's a lot of things out there, but like I always feel that the like queer character is always like serving a purpose that is usually expendable of some kind. Like I don't, when I picture shows that exist, I don't. It's hard to picture like two queer people unless like they're literally like that's like what the whole thing is about. It's
Or
like,
they're like some tragic figure that's dying.
They're either like or
sick with cancer.
Yeah.
Like
it's either like this, it's either the fool or like this like somebody who's really upsetting. But I think there's a sense also that being's purpose is to be queer also. Like there's never a like as far as like characters in shows that I see, it's like such a huge part of like so many gags and every punchline. You know, it's like, and it also just feels like there's like we're in a space where if it's like a sitcom with 3 characters, like one like I think we're in a space where it's like they can't all be white. You know what I mean? Like one has to be queer, one has to be something like, you know, something has to be so that it looks a bit different. But if any of those things, if there's 2, then all of a sudden it's that type of a show. Like as soon as, and so it's like this really weird space I feel like that is reserved. And I feel like mostly what I see a lot more the trans females like by 1,000% than trans males. I see a lot more gay, white, cisgendered males than I see lesbians. I feel like there is still a very, very intense like patriarchy within even like what's acceptable for queer.
Yeah, and what's interesting is a lot of those writing staffs of like TV shows, especially, they can be very diverse, yet they're not writing that diversity on screen. It's easy to write a gay man into a plot because you don't have to deal with too much because people kind of get that. It's a lot harder to write a trans man into a plot because then it's like, do we have to start doing issues? Do we have to start exploring
And
this?
the tragedy is like how bad that is for both, because like not only does it not, it's kind of like the like societal acceptance of things males and females are like allowed to do. And the same thing happens when you have like a gay male character. It's like not only does it keep this group from being represented and seen and validated, it also makes this group feel like this is what you are like. So you have one group who has like no idea based on like culture and based on like books, like a path to go, and you have a whole other group that's like, oh, I'm supposed to be like this. So it creates a huge gap and 2 different ways for like bad things to happen to your brain. I can't think of many. I mean, like,
Yeah, it's tough.
Orange is the New Black. Like since I didn't even watch. I don't know.
I really liked Looking.
Oh, yes, that's a great example.
Yeah.
Did you see?
I think I
Did
canceled.
you see that?
Yeah, I watched.
Of course it got canceled.
Yeah.
Because it
Yeah.
was different, where it showed different, just on the spectrum.
But even that
Just
gets into
different types
right,
of
and that is, but even that gets more into like, is this thing queer or not? And then it becomes like a very complicated. Like the film that we made is about like a straight cisgender woman who's in like the queer scene, queer community.
Yeah.
We don't talk about whether this person is queer or not, but like it's very interesting when all of a sudden it's like a film is labeled as this or that, depending on the festival, depending on like the marketing. I think that happens the same thing with characters. It's like it's more boxes to check of like trying representation. Some of these boxes are safer than others. You know what I mean? It's all, and I mean like and I don't know. It's just like there's even like with Pose. So now Pose, all of a sudden it's like, you know, trans people of color are all of a sudden some of the most seen trans performers that are actually like in media, but like it's because one show has 3 or 4. Do you know what I mean? It's like not like it's like this huge. It's just very. It's very upsetting.
I mean, I always have issues with shows like that. I mean, it's nice that that brought that to the forefront, but it's like just go back and watch the 1990 film Paris is Burning. There's the real thing. There's the scene from 1987 that Jenny Livingston filmed, and she was an NYU grad student at the time when she filmed it.
Yeah.
You know, she just went out and thought, you know, this is a whole subculture that nobody knows about. But then, look, it took almost 20 years to get to the screen again. That story, you know. But I'm glad you brought up Looking, because that's a perfect example. Because I find this a lot. There's almost sort of this hatred coming back from the LGBT community. One of the biggest complaints about Looking was, oh, it's boring, because it was trying to show everyday life for these people. And it wasn't this glamorous, over-the-top, you know,
Queer as fuck.
yeah, queer as folk, funny, sexy kind of show. It was just a show about these, you know, awkward people going through their everyday life. I found it fascinating. I thought it was one of the best shows ever, and I championed it, and I kept getting, you know, gay men especially going, oh God, it's the worst show ever. Why did they even put it on television? I'm like, but that's real life, you know? So do you feel there's that kind of pushback about like, we'll only accept certain types of LGBT characters and not others?
I mean, yeah, I mean, for me, it's like that. All we're talking about is like that really gray area between like art and commerce. I mean, like everything that's like ever going to be made is because somebody thinks they can make money off of it. And then you have people with voices and like stories that really we like, you know, should be told for people that need to hear them, but they don't get to. I mean, like, there's never been, you know, except for like really intense like shit that we don't like go to. Like what you're watching, somebody thinks they can make money off of it.
Yeah.
And if somebody thinks they can make money off of it, then like something has to be very structured before we can just like try and experiment and play with this. And like let's try to see what this story from this storyteller will actually be like, because the fact is it's going to take so much money that like this is safer. Maybe it's not that appropriate, but it's acceptable. We'll just keep doing that. And of course that is only going to lead to the specific people who have already been making things to be people who continue to make things. So now we're in a space more than anything else. I feel like that, like, to get back to it, is like there is a space commerce-wise, like people are ready to like make money off of like queer people, and I think that like Looking is an example of like if not enough people are into it, it's just gonna get.
I feel like the majority of stuff we're asked to do now is like we're either asked to do a doc on Madonna that is like, do a doc on Madonna, it'll be so gay, and we're like, uh-huh. And then, or like do a doc, we get asked to do a conversion therapy doc once every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Wow.
People only want to see something that's hyper gay or totally tragic about the queer experience. It's
Well,
just,
the same for the trans experience.
Yeah, it's the same
trans
exact
people
thing.
dying and
of
like,
course, it's the same thing.
Do you feel, because I do, I'll tip my hand, that a film like Love, Simon kind of goes against that?
Yeah, I think there are films
Which
like
is nice.
like Love, Simon, or like Can You Ever Forgive Me? I thought that was beautifully done. But then we have something like Bohemian Rhapsody that's nominated for an Oscar that's like so problematic in so many ways. It's ridiculous. Like, you know, it's like, yeah, we take like a half a step forward and then 10 steps back. It's like,
Well, and the fact, and we talked about this earlier, I'm a big research guy, and the fact that they took so many liberties with the story. I mean, it could have just been a story about any old singer.
right.
You know, why didn't they tell the real story of Queen as
Yeah.
opposed to, you know, that film
Mhm.
that came out and won all these awards? Yeah, it's crazy. I don't want to cut this short, but I want to leave some time for questions from our audience. Any questions for any of the filmmakers?
So you don't have to think
Yeah,
of
you
Yeah.
don't have to think
We're
of
not,
questions.
it's not like
Please don't,
It's
yeah.
not a test.
Don't rush them all at
You
once.
don't have to.
Or any comments, or
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting what I think all of you brought out in separate ways about how there isn't a space to be queer and an introvert, and I think that's so interesting. And I don't know if this is more of a question or a comment, but have you met artists or have you seen work by queer artists who aren't as loud? Because it's tragic. You have to be loud.
Oh no, I'm loud. Like, you know, when I'm home, I'm not wearing what I'm wearing right now. Like, you know, I'm loud, and like if we're going into HBO offices because I want people to be like, holy shit, this person is. But most of the time, I'm just wearing a sweatshirt and jeans, and I'm like, you know, like the mousy guy in the editing room. Like, it's most people are. I feel like most of the queer filmmakers I know aren't like out and loud and proud and constantly yelling about how they're gay. Like, it's not. Yeah, I feel like a lot of them are introverts, and I wish there were more stories about queer introverts. That is an uncommon thing. I wish there was a lot more of those.
Yeah, I get a lot of. I haven't written a play in 5 years, but when I was playwriting, I would get a lot of, how come you don't write about gay issues? Because everybody else is writing about gay issues, and that's not, you know, I found other interesting stories that I felt I could tell and tell well. I kind of felt, especially if it was going to be a gay story based on my life, I was like, it's kind of boring because I had the, you know, typical gay experience, you know, gay man experience growing up. I was in the closet till a certain age, and then I came out. And,
you saw this one.
Yeah. And there's plenty of those movies and TV shows and places I can find that in the media. I felt as a playwright, the stories I'm telling, you know, needed to be told. A lot of them were historical, so a lot of research and stuff like that. And I wanted to tell them right. Being, you know, it's like that misnomer of like being gay means you can't write other kinds of material. You know? Right. Now, you can't get into that trap. I feel, you know, a straight man or maybe me as a gay man, I can't write the trans experience, and I wouldn't try to, you know, because that's very specific, and you know, there might be a lot of issues I relate to that, and I've heard a lot of trans coming out stories, and I do relate to that, but I would never deign to write that experience. But you know, writing about Abraham Lincoln, well, yeah, I think a gay man can write about Abraham Lincoln just as well as a straight man can, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think the stories that I write too are, like, I have queer characters, I have trans characters, but they're not coming out stories, and they're not these hyper gay, queer, trans stories. It's like, it's everyday life stories. Yeah, it's just a part of, it's just a part of them, like, you know, I have brown eyes or whatever. That's, yeah.
And that's refreshing. I think we need more of that, and less, I mean, how many times can you tell a coming out story? Yes, it's important, but they're already out there. Right. So let's tell other stories within that experience, because, you know, for me as a gay man coming out, it's like, well, what do I do now? I have all this literature and media to tell me how to come out, but now I'm out. So how do I be out? Somebody make that film. Show me in my sweats at home at night, you know, watching Netflix. Yeah.
And I think the industry just doesn't want that in general, you know, like that was the issue with Looking, right? Because people were like, it's not interesting enough.
Yeah, there aren't these events
There's always the, like, it's not trans enough.
I feel like people also, when you're pitching something, they don't want that. They want, like, I can tell that people respond much stronger when I'm, like, dolled up and looking, you know what I mean? Like, you just pull focus to yourself at, you know, it's like you have to sort of present what people want until you can trick them into just letting you make the shit you want to make.
And when you're dealing with executives, they want plot points, they want big moments, they want to know your story can last for years. If it's a TV show, they want, you know, they want all the pop, they want all the sizzle. They don't want the, you know, they don't want subtlety.
Right.